Some journeys begin with a map, others begin with a broken heart. This is the true story of a boy from Honduras who grows up with a single dream: to find the mother who left years earlier in search of a better life in the United States. She did not leave because she stopped loving him. She left because poverty gave her no other choice. For a child, however, absence has no explanation. It becomes an unanswered question that echoes through every passing year. At the age when most children dream of school, friends, and tomorrow's adventures, Enrique of freight trains, distant borders, and the impossible road that separates him from the only embrace he longs to feel again. His journey will carry him across mountains and deserts, through hunger, fear, violence, and extraordinary acts of kindness. He will fall, return, and begin again, driven by a hope stronger than exhaustion and a love stronger than fear. This is not a tale of politics or statistics. It is the story of one human heart searching for another. Millions have traveled similar roads. Enrique's story gives a face, name, and a voice to those whose footsteps are too often lost beneath the noise of history. Come, let us walk beside him, not as judges, but as fellow travelers, and witness a journey measured not only in miles, but in courage, sacrifice, and the enduring power of a child's love for his. Some journeys begin with a map, others begin with a broken heart. This is the true story of a boy from Honduras who grows up with a single dream: to find the mother who left years earlier in search of a better life in the United States. She did not leave because she stopped loving him. She left because poverty gave her no other choice. For a child, however, absence has no explanation. It becomes an unanswered question that echoes through every passing year. At the age when most children dream of school, friends, and tomorrow's adventures, Enrique of freight trains, distant borders, and the impossible road that separates him from the only embrace he longs to feel again. His journey will carry him across mountains and deserts, through hunger, fear, violence, and extraordinary acts of kindness. He will fall, return, and begin again, driven by a hope stronger than exhaustion and a love stronger than fear. This is not a tale of politics or statistics. It is the story of one human heart searching for another. Millions have traveled similar roads. Enrique's story gives a face, name, and a voice to those whose footsteps are too often lost beneath the noise of history. Come, let us walk beside him, not as judges, but as fellow travelers, and witness a journey measured not only in miles, but in courage, sacrifice, and the enduring power of a child's love for his. Enrique was born into a humble home in Honduras, where life was measured not by abundance but by perseverance. His family possessed little in the way of material wealth, yet they shared the simple comforts that come from love, hard work, and hope. Every day was a struggle to clothing and the basic necessities of life. His mother Lourdes worked tirelessly to care for her children. Like countless parents facing poverty, she dreamed of giving them opportunities that seemed forever beyond her reach. Although young Enrique could not fully understand the hardships surrounding he knew the warmth of his mother's embrace and the comfort of having her close to him. Home was a place of security, a place where tomorrow looked much like today. He had no way of knowing that circumstances were quietly preparing to change the course of his life forever. What lay ahead would courage, his determination, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. It would become a journey that millions have experienced, but few have ever been. As the years passed, life in Honduras grew even more difficult. Jobs were scarce, wages were low, and providing even the basic necessities for a family became an overwhelming struggle. Like many parents facing the same harsh reality, Lourdes was forced to confront a choice she ever wishes to make. She could remain with her children and watch their futures slowly disappear beneath the weight of poverty. Or she could leave everything familiar behind in the hope of earning enough money in the United States to give them a better life. It was not a decision born of ambition, but of sacrifice. Every mile that would separate her from Enrique would also deepen the ache in her own heart. Yet she believed that temporary separation offered the only chance for a better tomorrow to young Enrique. However, the reasons were impossible to understand. All he knew was that the person who had been there would soon be gone. He could not see the burden his mother carried or the tears she shed in silence before making the hardest decision of her life. That farewell would become the defining moment of Enrique's childhood. It was the beginning of a journey neither mother nor son could have imagined, a journey not only in distance, but in years of longing, hope, and unwavering love. After his mother's departure, the house that had once felt warm and familiar became strangely quiet. Enrique remained in Honduras, cared for by relatives who did their best to provide for him. They offered him food, shelter, and guidance, but there was one thing no one could replace: a mother's presence. As the months turned into years, Enrique struggled to understand why she had left. He was too young to grasp the burden of poverty or the sacrifices that had forced her to make such a painful decision. To him, it simply felt as though the person he loved most had disappeared. Birthdays, holidays, and ordinary days passed with an empty place in his heart. He watched other children with their mothers and quietly wondered when, or if, his own would return. Yet even in her absence, Lourdes remained a part of his life. Her memory never faded, and neither did the day they would be together again. That hope, fragile as it seemed, slowly became the force that would shape Enrique's future and carry him toward a journey few could imagine. Although hundreds of miles separated them, Lourdes never stopped thinking about her children. From the United States, she worked long hours, often taking difficult jobs that left her exhausted. Much of what she earned was sent home to help provide food, clothing, and school supplies. Whenever she could, she wrote letters or called home. Those moments became precious to Enrique. He listened carefully to the sound of his mother's voice, trying to hold on to every word before the call ended. The conversations were brief, but they reminded him that he had not been forgotten. The money she sent eased some families' hardships, yet it could never replace her presence. A letter could not offer a hug, and a telephone call could not comfort a lonely child after a difficult day. The distance between them remained as real as ever. Even so, each letter and every phone call kept hope. Enrique began to believe that somewhere beyond the horizon, his mother was waiting for the day they would be together again. That hope slowly grew into a dream that would one day lead him to make a life-changing decision. As Enrique grew older, the hope of seeing his mother again never left him. The years had not erased the loneliness he felt as a child. Instead, they had strengthened his determination. Every letter he received and every phone call he treasured reminded him that his mother was still waiting somewhere far beyond the horizon. The stories he heard about the dangerous journey north did little to discourage him. He knew the risks. Many people never reached their destination. Others were robbed, injured, or sent back before they could cross the border. Yet the thought of living the rest of his life without seeing his mother seemed even more painful. One day, Enrique made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. He would leave Honduras and search for his mother in the United States. He packed only what he could carry and said goodbye to the world he had always known. He had no detailed map, no certainty of success, and very little money. What he did have was an unshakable belief that somewhere at the end of the long and dangerous road, his mother was waiting. With that single decision, Enrique stepped into the unknown. His childhood was behind him. Ahead lay one of the most difficult any young person could undertake. With a small backpack and little more than determination, Enrique left Honduras and began his journey north. Every step carried him farther from the only home he had ever known and closer to an uncertain future. Crossing into Guatemala was only the beginning. The borders were easy to draw, but crossing them on foot was another matter. He traveled through unfamiliar towns and countryside, meeting other migrants who shared the same dream of reaching the United States. Each carried a different story, yet all were united by hope and necessity. Money was scarce. Every meal had to be carefully measured. Nights were often spent wherever shelter could be found, beneath trees, in abandoned buildings, or alongside others making the same difficult journey. Fear became a constant companion, but so did determination. For Enrique, turning back was never an option. Every mile brought him closer to the possibility of seeing his mother again. That hope was stronger than exhaustion, stronger than uncertainty, and stronger than the dangers that lay ahead. He did not yet know that the greatest challenges of his journey were still waiting beyond the. Ahead stood the freight trains of Mexico, where thousands of migrants would risk everything for a chance to continue. After crossing Guatemala, Enrique entered southern Mexico, where he encountered the freight trains that migrants simply called La Bestia, the beast. These trains were never meant to carry passengers. They hauled cargo across the country, yet, for thousands of desperate migrants, the only affordable path north. There were no tickets to buy and no seats waiting to be filled. Migrants climbed onto moving freight cars, pulled themselves onto steel ladders, and balanced on rooftops. As the trains thundered across mountains, forests, and deserts, a single mistake could mean a devastating fall beneath the wheels. Enrique watched others climb aboard. Some had made the journey before and offered quiet advice, just as frightened as he was. When the train finally began to move, he gathered his courage, reached for the cold steel ladder, and upward. As the train gathered speed, the villages disappeared behind him. The wind rushed across his face, carrying him farther from the life he had known and deeper into an uncertain future. There was no turning back now. Every mile carried him closer to his mother, but also to dangers he had never imagined. The journey aboard La Bestia had begun. The days aboard La Bestia blended into one another. The train carried Enrique north through unfamiliar landscapes, but it offered little comfort. There was no shelter from the blazing sun during the day, or the cold winds that swept across the freight cars at night. Sleep came only in brief moments, always interrupted by the fear of falling or missing the next stop. Food became scarce. Sometimes, generous strangers waiting near the tracks handed bottles of water or bags of bread to passing migrants. At other times, there was nothing. Hunger became a constant companion. Of clean water was treasured. The physical hardship was matched by emotional exhaustion. Enrique missed his home, his friends, and the life he had left behind. Yet each difficult day strengthened his resolve. He reminded himself why he had begun this journey. Somewhere beyond the endless miles, his mother was waiting. As the train rolled farther into Mexico, Enrique learned an important lesson. Survival depended not only on courage, but on endurance. Every sunrise was another chance to move forward. Every sunset meant he had come one day closer to. Still, even greater dangers waited ahead. As the journey continued through Mexico, the dangers became impossible to ignore. Migrants were no longer battling only hunger and exhaustion. They also faced criminals who saw them as easy targets. Gangs waited near railroad tracks and isolated crossings, knowing migrants carried the little money they had saved for the journey. Some were robbed, others were threatened or beaten. Corrupt officials sometimes demanded bribes from people who had almost nothing left to give. Every stop brought uncertainty. Enrique learned to trust cautiously, speak little, constantly alert. He quickly realized that survival depended not only on determination, but also on good judgment and the kindness of strangers who appeared at just the right moment. Even under these conditions, Enrique refused to abandon his dream. He reminded himself left home. Every obstacle, every frightening encounter, and every difficult mile strengthened his resolve to reach his mother. The road ahead remained dangerous, but his hope continued to carry him forward. Not every face Enrique encountered brought fear. Along the long railroad routes through Mexico, there were people who refused to look away from the suffering passing before them. They knew the risks the migrants faced, yet they chose compassion over indifference. As freight trains rumbled through towns and villages, local residents gathered beside the tracks with bags of bread, bottles of water, fruit, and simple meals. Some stretched out their hands as the train rolled by, hoping a tired traveler could catch what they threw. Others opened the doors of churches and shelters, offering a place to rest, wash, and recover before the journey continued. For Enrique, these moments restored more than his strength. They reminded him that kindness could still be found, even in the midst of hardship. A piece of bread, a cup of water, or a few words of encouragement often meant the difference between despair and hope. Years later, Enrique would remember not only the dangers he survived, but also the strangers who asked for nothing in return. Their compassion became an unforgettable part of his journey, proving that even along the hardest roads, humanity has the power. The farther Enrique traveled into Mexico, the more difficult it became to avoid the authorities responsible for enforcing immigration laws. Patrols monitored train routes, bus stations, and highways, searching for migrants attempting to continue north without legal permission. One day, Enrique's journey came to an abrupt halt. He was detained along with other migrants and placed into custody. In a matter of hours, the dream that had carried him across hundreds of miles seemed to vanish. Everything he had endured, the hunger, exhaustion, and endless uncertainty, to have been soon afterward, he was returned to his homeland. Standing once again on familiar ground, Enrique faced a painful reality. He was no closer to seeing his mother than when he had first set out. Many people would have accepted defeat after such a setback. The physical cost had already been enormous, but Enrique was not ready to surrender. His love for his mother remained stronger than disappointment, and the dream that had carried him this far refused to die. Deep within himself, he made another decision. If one attempt had failed, find the courage to begin again. For Enrique, the journey was far from over. In many ways, it was only beginning. Returning to Honduras was not the ending Enrique had imagined. He had invested everything he possessed, his strength, his hope, and countless miles of hardship only to find himself back where he had started. For a time, disappointment weighed heavily upon him. The dream of reaching his further away than ever. Friends and relatives wondered whether he should abandon the journey and accept that some dreams were simply beyond reach. But Enrique could not silence the voice within him that urged him to continue. Every memory of his mother, every letter she had written, and every conversation reminded him why he had begun this difficult path. He understood that failure was not the same as defeat. Failure was only one chapter in a much longer story. With renewed determination, Enrique prepared himself for another attempt. He knew the dangers had not. The road would be just as long, the risks just as great, and the uncertainty just as real. Yet something inside him had changed. He was no longer simply chasing a dream. He had become a young man determined to finish what he had started. Once again, he picked up his bag, looked toward the distant horizon, and began walking north. The journey continued. After countless miles, repeated setbacks, and more than one attempt, Enrique finally reached the border, separating Mexico from the United States. It was the obstacle he had imagined since leaving Honduras, yet standing before it, he understood. that the hardest part of the journey had not been rivers, riding freight trains, or surviving hunger. It had been refusing to give up. The final crossing demanded patience, caution, and courage. Every step had to be carefully considered. The risks remained real, and the outcome was far from certain. Enrique's mistake could erase everything he had struggled to achieve. When he finally reached American soil, there was no celebration, no cheering crowds, and no sense that his journey had truly ended. Instead, he felt a quiet mixture of relief, exhaustion. The country he had dreamed about for so many years was finally before him. Yet, Enrique understood that crossing the border was not the same as finding his mother. Somewhere in this vast and unfamiliar land, she was living and working, unaware that her son was now closer. The greatest reunion of his life was now within reach. After countless miles, repeated setbacks, and more than one attempt, Enrique finally reached the border separating Mexico from the United States. It was the obstacle he had imagined since leaving Honduras, yet standing before it, he understood that the hardest part of the journey had not been crossing rivers, riding freight trains, or surviving hunger. It had been refusing to give up. The final crossing demanded patience, caution, and courage. Every step had to be carefully considered. The risks remained real, and the outcome was far from certain. Enrique knew that one day everything he had struggled to achieve. When he finally reached American soil, there was no celebration, no cheering crowds, and no sense that his journey had truly ended. Instead, he felt a quiet mixture of relief, exhaustion, and disbelief. The country he dreamed about for so many years was finally before him. Yet Enrique understood that crossing the border was not the same as finding his mother. Somewhere in this vast and unfamiliar land, she was living and working, unaware that her son was now closer than he had ever been. The greatest reunion of his life was now within reach. After years of separation, countless miles, and more obstacles than either of them could have imagined, the moment finally arrived. Enrique stood before the door that led to the person he had crossed a continent to find. For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. Childhood and the endless hope all converged into a single heartbeat. When the door opened, mother and son looked at one another in silence. Were no words that could recover the years they had lost. No explanation could erase the pain of separation. Yet none of that mattered in that first embrace. Words held the son she had left behind as a little boy. Enrique embraced the mother he had dreamed of finding through every mile of his extraordinary journey. Their tears spoke more clearly than words ever could. The journey that had begun in a small home in Honduras had finally reached its pure destination. While the journey across countries had ended, another journey, the journey of rebuilding a family after years apart, was. The reunion brought immense joy, but it could not erase the years they had spent apart. Enrique and Lourdes were finally together, yet they had become strangers in many ways. The little boy she had left behind had grown into a young man shaped by hardship, determination, and experiences people could imagine. They began the slow process of building a new life together. Simple moments, sharing meals, talking late into the evening, and learning about the years they had missed became precious. Each conversation filled another small gap created by time and distance. There were moments of happiness, but there were also moments of sadness, even though the lost years could never be recovered. Rather than dwelling on what had been taken from them, they chose to treasure the time they now shared. Enrique's journey had changed more than his destination. It had transformed the way family, sacrifice, and the extraordinary strength that hope can give to ordinary people. The miles behind him had ended, but a new chapter of life was just beginning. Enrique's journey did not end with his reunion. it became part of a much larger story shared by countless families separated by poverty, distance, and the hope for a better future. His experiences reflected the struggles of many people whose names would never appear in newspapers or books. When journalist Sonia Nazario learned of Enrique's remarkable journey, she set out to understand every step he had taken. She traveled the same routes, spoke with the people who had helped him, and carefully documented the hardships, sacrifices, and acts of kindness that shaped his search for his mother. Her work brought Enrique's story to readers around the world. It transformed one young man's experience into a powerful reminder of the human cost of migration and the extraordinary resilience of families determined to stay connected despite overwhelming obstacles. Enrique never intended to become a symbol. He was simply a son who refused to abandon the hope of seeing his mother again. Yet through the telling of his story, millions of people gained a deeper understanding of the courage, sacrifice, and determination that often lie behind a migrant's. His journey belonged to one family, but its message spoke to the world. Enrique set out in search of one person, his mother. What he found along the way was far greater than he could have imagined. His journey revealed the extraordinary strength that ordinary people can discover when guided by love, hope, and determination. He encountered hunger, fear, disappointment, kindness, and compassion. He was helped by strangers who expected nothing in return and challenged by obstacles that would have caused many to abandon their dreams. Yet, through every hardship, one simple truth remained unchanged. The love between a mother and her was stronger than the distance that separated them. Enrique's story is not unique because it is the only one of its kind. It is unique because it gives a human face to the countless families whose struggles often go unseen. Behind every long journey lies a story of sacrifice, courage, for a better future. This has been more than a journey across countries and borders. It has been an epic journey of the human spirit, a reminder that love can endure separation, hope can survive hardship, and compassion can illuminate even the darkest roads. May Enrique inspire us not only to admire courage, but also to recognize our shared humanity in every traveler seeking hope beyond the horizon. A tribute to Sonia Nazario. This presentation was inspired by the remarkable work of journalist Sonia Nazario, whose award-winning book, Enrique's Journey, brought to light one young man's extraordinary search for his mother and the struggles faced by countless migrant families. Enrique's story, Sonia Nazario did far more than conduct interviews. She retraced much of his journey through Central America and Mexico, spoke with the people who helped him along the way, and spent years documenting the realities behind his experience. Her dedication transformed his story into a work of journalism that has touched readers around the world. Originally published as a Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper series and later expanded into a best-selling book, Enrique's Journey, has been translated into multiple languages and communities across the United States. Presentation has moved you. I encourage you to read the original book. You can learn more about Sonia Nazario and her work at Enrique's Journey official website. The book is available through Penguin Random House and can also be found through most major bookstores, libraries, and online book. With gratitude and respect to Sonia Nazario for her extraordinary journalism and for sharing Enrique's unforgettable journey with the world.